At exactly 2:47 a.m. Eastern Time, the lights went out. Not just in one neighborhood, not just in one city. From the tall buildings of Manhattan to the quiet suburbs of Boston, from the refineries of Houston to the suburbs of Los Angeles, the power grid that keeps this entire country alive simply stopped. Refrigerators fell silent, streetlights vanished, elevators froze between floors. In hospitals, backup generators roared to life as nurses ran through darkened hallways with flashlights, manually squeezing bags to keep patients breathing. In small homes across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and upstate New York, elderly Americans, many living alone, woke up in total blackness. Some reached for their oxygen concentrators only to hear the machines slowly wind down and stop. Others fumbled for their phones in the dark, trying desperately to call their children. But there was no signal. The quiet beeping of medical devices faded, and then there was only silence and fear. This was not a winter storm. This was not a transformer failure. Tonight, we are looking at a scenario that feels terrifyingly real. In just 48 hours, a coordinated cyber and mini EMP operation carried out by Iran with direct technical support from Russia and China successfully collapsed major portions of the United States power grid. The attack was silent, it was precise, and it exposed just how fragile the backbone of modern American life truly is. This is a purely hypothetical strategic analysis. Everything you are about to hear is an educational examination of a plausible scenario based on real-world capabilities we have already seen in other countries, known vulnerabilities in America's aging infrastructure, and the documented cooperation between Iran, Russia, and China. It is not a prediction of future events. It is not a call for violence. It is a sober, unflinching look at risks that exist today so that we, as Americans, can understand the dangers facing our nation and prepare accordingly. Let me be perfectly clear from the very beginning. This content is for educational and analytical purposes only. It does not endorse or support any form of aggression or violence against the United States or any other nation. 4 critical questions will guide this entire analysis tonight. I ask you to keep them in your mind as we move forward, because each answer builds upon the previous one, and only when you see the full picture will you understand how something like this could actually happen. First, how could Iran, working together with Russian cyber operatives and Chinese technological backing, penetrate and disable critical segments of America's power grid so quickly and effectively? Second, what specific tools, advanced malware, supply chain vulnerabilities, and small high-altitude EMP devices made this kind of coordinated strike possible against a system most Americans assumed was secure? Third, how would American emergency services, the military, and federal agencies actually respond once the lights went out? And why would the first 48 hours prove so incredibly difficult? Fourth, what would the human, economic, and strategic consequences be for everyday families, especially older Americans on fixed incomes, and for America's position in the world if our power grid were taken offline for days? These are serious, uncomfortable questions, but they are questions we can no longer afford to ignore. Before we dive into the timeline and technical details, I want to ask something of everyone watching tonight. If you value honest, in-depth strategic analysis that looks at the world as it actually is, not as we might wish it to be, then please show your support right now. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with friends and family who care about America's security and future. Your engagement helps bring more of this kind of straightforward, no-nonsense discussion. Now, let us walk through, step by step and layer by layer, exactly how such a nightmare scenario could unfold and what it would truly mean for every single American. Let's talk about the real technologies and methods that would make an operation of this scale possible. This is not science fiction from a Hollywood movie. These capabilities already exist today. They have been tested and refined in real conflicts, from the power grid attacks in Ukraine to the Stuxnet operation years ago, and they are being steadily improved through deep, ongoing cooperation between Iran, Russia, and China. The attack would unfold in 3 coordinated reinforcing layers, each one designed to exploit the known and long-ignored weaknesses of America's aging power grid. The opening move would be a sophisticated, stealthy cyber campaign. Russian cyber units, with years of hard-won experience from repeated attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, would develop and provide the primary malware. Iran would contribute operational teams familiar with American targets and regional timing. These programs would not arrive with loud ransomware notes or flashy warnings. They would be sleepers, inserted quietly over months or even years through compromised software updates, phishing campaigns against utility employees, and supply chain attacks. Once inside the SCADA and PLC systems that control power plants and substations, they would sit dormant, mapping the network, testing connections, and waiting patiently for the signal. When activated, they would flip breakers, falsify sensor data, and trigger automated shutdowns across multiple regions simultaneously. Supporting the cyber attack would be something even more insidious: pre-placed vulnerabilities in the physical hardware itself. Many critical components in America's power grid, transformers, protective relays, monitoring equipment, contain parts manufactured or supplied through global chains with significant Chinese involvement. For years, security experts have quietly warned about potential hidden backdoors in this equipment. In a coordinated crisis, these backdoors could be activated remotely, bypassing software defenses entirely and causing physical damage that is far harder and more expensive to repair. This layer turns America's heavy dependence on global supply chains into a strategic liability we have ignored for too long. The final decisive blow would come from high-altitude electromagnetic pulse weapons. Iran, using technology shared and refined with Russian and Chinese assistance, would launch a series of smaller, precisely calibrated EMP devices. These could be delivered from submarines off the east and Gulf coasts or from high-altitude drones. These are not massive nuclear detonations. They are modest pulses designed to overload transformers and fry control electronics within a limited but critical radius. When combined with the chaos already created by cyber and hardware attacks, even a few well-placed mini EMP strikes could turn temporary blackouts into long-term infrastructure destruction. The preparation for such an operation would be patient, professional, and spread over many years. Intelligence teams would meticulously map America's grid, identifying the critical substations, control centers, and interconnects that hold the entire system together. They would study its well-known weaknesses: an aging infrastructure built decades ago, thousands of large transformers that can take 12 to 18 months to manufacture and replace, limited spare parts, stockpiles, and control systems never designed to withstand modern nation-state cyber and electromagnetic warfare. Much of this reconnaissance could be done quietly through commercial satellites, open-source data, and compromised vendors. Malware would be inserted gradually. Hardware vulnerabilities would be cultivated years in advance. Delivery platforms for EMP devices would be tested and positioned without drawing attention. This combination, cyber infiltration, hardware compromise, and electromagnetic strike, represents asymmetric warfare at its most refined and ruthless level. It takes America's single greatest strength, our modern, highly interconnected society that depends completely on reliable electricity, and turns it into our most dangerous vulnerability. What makes this scenario particularly concerning is how these technologies have matured rapidly through real conflicts, and how the strategic partnership between Iran, Russia, and China has dramatically accelerated their development. The result is a credible, highly deniable capability that could reach deep inside the American homeland in ways our current defenses and infrastructure have simply not fully prepared for. Now let's walk through the attack, minute by minute, hour by hour, echelon by echelon. This is not random chaos or a lucky cyber glitch. This is a carefully planned, layered, and sequenced operation designed to systematically dismantle America's power grid while defenders are still reacting to earlier phases. Every echelon creates the conditions for the next. This is the terrifying logic of modern asymmetric warfare. At exactly 2:47 a.m. Eastern Time, the operation begins in complete silence. Thousands of dormant malware programs quietly planted over months and years through compromised software updates, third-party vendors, and phishing campaigns wake up across the United States. These sleepers, developed jointly by Russian and Iranian cyber units, begin their work without triggering any alarms. They map SCADA systems, test communication channels, and prepare hidden command pathways inside power plants, transmission substations, and regional control centers from New England to California. Their mission at this stage is not destruction. It is reconnaissance and positioning. Within 6 hours, the attackers possess a real-time, high-resolution view of the entire grid's condition and vulnerabilities. By 8:47 a.m., they control hidden access points deep inside America's critical infrastructure without a single alarm being raised. The stage is now quietly set for the main assault. At approximately 9 a.m., Echelon 2 strikes with full force. Using the access gained in the first phase, the attackers release their primary malware payload. Control centers in the Northeast, Texas, and California suddenly lose visibility. Operators stare in disbelief as screens go blank or display false readings. Automatic safety systems begin tripping breakers for protection that isn't needed. Power plants are ordered to shut down by systems they no longer fully control. Within hours, large sections of the grid go dark. The famous Northeast blackout begins spreading rapidly. By 2:47 p.m., exactly 12 hours after the first malware activated major metropolitan areas from Boston to Washington, D.C., Chicago to Houston, and parts of California are without power. Families wake up to dark houses, silent refrigerators, and growing panic. The logic is brutally effective. Blind the human operators first, then let the system begin to collapse under its own automated safety protocols. The attackers have turned America's own sophisticated protection systems against itself. As the blackout spreads, Echelon 3 begins. The malware now actively induces cascading failures. It forces overloaded transmission lines to remain connected longer than safe, causing physical overheating and explosions at key relay stations. At the same time, small teams of operatives or pre-positioned devices damage critical physical relays and substations that are difficult to protect 24/7. By the 2-4-hour mark, what began as a cyber incident has become a physical and digital catastrophe. Hundreds of high-voltage transformers, massive pieces of equipment that can take 12 to 18 months to manufacture and replace, are either destroyed or severely damaged. The grid is no longer just offline. Large portions of it are physically broken. Cities plunge deeper into darkness. This phase ensures that even if utilities regain some digital control, the hardware damage will keep the lights out for days or weeks. At this point, when emergency crews are desperately trying to restore power, Echelon 4 delivers the knockout blow. Iran launches a series of targeted mini EMP devices either from submarines positioned off the east and Gulf coasts or from high-altitude drones. These are not massive nuclear detonations. They are smaller, precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses designed to fry electronics within a limited but critical radius. The strikes focus on the largest remaining substations and backup control centers. Transformers that survived the earlier attacks now suffer catastrophic internal damage. Backup generators and communication systems are also affected. By hour 30, the attackers have achieved what military planners call a mission kill on America's power grid. Restoration is no longer measured in hours or days. It is now measured in weeks and months. The attackers do not stop after creating the darkness. Echelon 5 is specifically designed to keep the lights off. New waves of malware target repair crews' communication systems, GPS coordinates, and logistics networks delivering replacement parts. Suspected sabotage incidents occur at key repair sites. False reports flood emergency channels, wasting precious time and resources. Some compromised systems even send repair teams to the wrong locations. The goal is simple but devastating. Make recovery as slow, dangerous, and chaotic as possible. Every hour the grid stays down increases panic, economic damage, and political pressure on decision makers. In the final echelon, the attackers shift from active destruction to consolidation and control. They maintain just enough pressure through sporadic cyber pulses and targeted sabotage to prevent any meaningful large-scale restoration. By the 4-8 hour mark, large portions of the United States have been without reliable power for 2 full days. Supermarkets are emptying. Fuel pumps are offline. Hospitals are rationing generator fuel. Millions of elderly Americans sit in dark, cold, or extremely hot homes, wondering when or if the lights will come back on. The psychological and societal impact has now far surpassed the physical damage. What makes this 6-echelon sequence so logically devastating is its progressive, layered design. Each phase deliberately exploits the weaknesses created by the previous one. Cyber opens the door. Physical damage makes repair difficult. EMP makes it nearly impossible, and sustained pressure prevents meaningful recovery. This is asymmetric warfare taken to its most refined and frightening extreme, using relatively accessible tools to strike at the heart of a superpower's infrastructure. American forces, emergency services, National Guard units, and utility workers would fight heroically to restore power. But the math, the planning, and the coordinated execution reveal deeply uncomfortable vulnerabilities that exist in our current critical infrastructure today. Now let's examine how American forces and emergency services would likely respond in those critical first hours and days, and what the immediate consequences would actually look like for millions of ordinary Americans, especially older citizens living on fixed incomes. As soon as the first major substations went dark, the United States government sprang into action. The president was awakened in the middle of the night. FEMA activated its highest level of emergency response. The Department of Homeland Security declared a national emergency. National Guard units across more than a dozen states were mobilized within hours. Military units were placed on heightened alert to support civil authorities and protect remaining critical infrastructure from secondary attacks or looting. American service members, first responders, and utility workers moved quickly and professionally, as they always do in times of crisis. Coast Guard vessels delivered emergency generators to coastal areas. Air Force transport planes carried whatever spare transformers were available. Yet within the first day, everyone realized the terrifying truth. This was not a normal blackout. The combination of sophisticated cyber attacks and targeted mini EMP strikes had crippled the system in ways that made rapid restoration extremely difficult. The human consequences struck fast and without mercy. Hospitals that still had backup generators raced against time as diesel fuel began running low. Doctors performed emergency surgeries by flashlight and headlamps. Nurses manually ventilated patients when power to breathing machines failed. In nursing homes across Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and upstate New York, thousands of elderly Americans, many living alone, suddenly found themselves without power for oxygen concentrators, dialysis machines, or refrigerated life-saving medications. Many could not call for help because cell networks were overwhelmed or down. Supermarkets and pharmacies emptied within the first 24 hours. Without refrigeration, perishable food began to spoil rapidly. Pharmacies could not access electronic records or dispense temperature-sensitive medicines. ATM machines stopped working. Gas stations with electric pumps ran dry. Millions of families suddenly faced the reality of having no working refrigerator, no heat or air conditioning, and no easy way to get help. For millions of older Americans living on fixed Social Security incomes, the situation became especially cruel and frightening. Many who had carefully budgeted their monthly checks now faced impossible choices: buy overpriced bottled water and canned food, or try to survive in dark, cold, or extremely hot apartments. Those with chronic medical conditions watched their carefully managed routines collapse overnight. The sense of fear and helplessness was profound. Many later described sitting in the dark, listening to battery-powered radios, wondering if help would come in time or whether their children and grandchildren were safe. The economic damage mounted with frightening speed. Analysts estimate that a nationwide grid failure lasting 48 hours or more would cause hundreds of billions of dollars in direct losses, spoiled food, lost wages, halted commerce, destroyed equipment, and insurance claims on a scale never seen before. Stock markets would plunge. Supply chains that depend on just-in-time delivery would freeze across the entire country. Emergency response teams, firefighters, police officers, National Guard soldiers, and utility crews worked heroically around the clock. But the sheer scale of simultaneous failures stretched every resource to the breaking point. Calls for help overwhelmed 911 systems. Traffic lights stopped working, causing widespread accidents. Reports of looting and civil unrest began appearing in major cities as the blackout continued into the second and third day. This is not exaggeration for dramatic effect. It is the logical, foreseeable outcome when a modern, electricity-dependent society is suddenly deprived of the one resource everything else relies upon. The bravery of our first responders, military personnel, and utility workers remains beyond question. Yet this scenario lays bare an uncomfortable truth. Our current critical infrastructure, built decades ago for a different era, faces genuine and severe challenges when confronted with sophisticated, multi-layered asymmetric attacks. These immediate effects would not remain confined to the blackout zones. Within days, they would radiate outward across the entire country, touching family budgets, retirement savings, medical care, and national confidence in ways that would be impossible to ignore. What would this kind of attack truly mean beyond the immediate darkness and hardship across America? The strategic and geopolitical consequences would be profound, far-reaching, and potentially reshaping the global order for years to come. In the days and weeks following the 4 8-hour grid collapse, the United States would face some of the most difficult decisions in modern history. Naval forces and air assets positioned overseas would be urgently recalled to support domestic recovery and protect remaining critical infrastructure. Budgets originally planned for new carrier groups or advanced systems abroad would be redirected toward emergency grid hardening, spare transformers, and cyber defense programs. This necessary reallocation would send a clear and unmistakable signal to the entire world. America's attention and military bandwidth are not unlimited. That signal would ripple through every allied capital from Tokyo and Seoul to Warsaw, Riyadh, and Tel Aviv. Nations that have built their security strategies around the assumption of reliable American extended deterrence would begin quiet but very serious reassessments. If a coordinated asymmetric strike could bring large parts of the United States to a standstill in just 48 hours, what does that say about the credibility of security guarantees half a world away? The question would no longer be theoretical. This scenario would dramatically accelerate the shift toward a multipolar world. Iran, working hand in glove with Russian cyber expertise and Chinese technological and industrial support, would have demonstrated that a determined coalition can strike deep inside American power without ever needing a traditional military invasion. The broader Axis network would gain enormous prestige and influence. Countries in the global south already hedging their bets would feel further encouraged to diversify away from dollar-dominated systems. Oil prices would surge globally. Shipping insurance rates would skyrocket. Confidence in America's ability to protect its homeland and by extension its allies would be severely shaken. Yet perhaps the deepest and most lasting consequence would be to the very concept of American extended deterrence, the foundational promise that has underwritten global security since 1945. For 75 years, that deterrence rested not only on superior weapons, but on the demonstrated will of the United States to stand firm when the costs become real. A situation in which America must pull forces back to protect its own power grid would force a painful national conversation about priorities, capabilities, and the changing character of warfare in the 21st century. This is precisely why exercises like this hypothetical analysis matter so much. They are not designed to frighten or demoralize us. They are meant to wake us up. America remains an extraordinarily resilient, innovative, and powerful nation. We have overcome far greater challenges throughout our history, from the Civil War and the Great Depression to World War II and the Cold War. But true resilience requires honesty. It requires an unflinching assessment of new threats, serious long-term investment in modernizing our power grid, strengthening cyber defenses, building strategic redundancy, and preparing our communities, especially our older citizens, for emergencies. In closing, this entire presentation has been a purely hypothetical strategic analysis, an educational thought experiment designed to illuminate real and emerging risks based on documented capabilities and observable trends in modern warfare. It does not predict the future. It does not endorse any form of conflict or violence. Its only purpose is to encourage clearer thinking about the world we actually live in and the steps we must take to remain secure and strong. The imagined darkness across American cities in this scenario would not represent the end of American power, but it would stand as a clear and urgent warning that the rules of the game are changing. The question we must all confront as citizens, as leaders, and as a nation is whether we will adapt with clarity, determination, and strategic patience, or whether we will continue assuming that yesterday's advantages will automatically protect us tomorrow. If this analysis gave you serious food for thought, the kind of honest, in-depth discussion that is becoming increasingly rare, please support it. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share this video with others who care about America's future and security, and leave your own thoughts in the comments below. This kind of conversation matters. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.